Order, please. We will now begin with the daily proceedings of the House. Presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I'm directed to report that the committee has met and has considered the following bills. Bill number 11, an act respecting civil forfeiture of property. Bill number 12, an act to amend Chapter 154 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Evidence Act. Bill number 13, an act to amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 2000, the Probate Act. Bill number 15, an act to amend Chapter 430 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Small Claims Court Act. Bill number 27, an act to amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act. Bill number 39, an act to amend Chapter 399 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Rental Property Conversion Act. Bill number 41, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act. Bill number 43, an act to amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act. Bill number 49, an act to amend Chapter 71 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act. Bill number 52, an act to amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994, the Credit Union Act. The committee recommends these bills to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Or that these bills be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a notice from Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor. Oh, regarding as well amendments affecting the Constitution Act.
Notice it's tabled. Statement by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canadians are some of the most ardent hockey fans, and Hockey Night in Canada's Family Breakaway Contest will honour some of its biggest supporters. Whereas some of those fans stand out with their level of enthusiasm, like Toronto Maple Leaf fans, Christine Daigle and her parents Gina and Walter. Whereas Christine, a grade 11 student of Inverness Education Centre Academy, was born with Dandy Walker syndrome, leaving her dealing with ongoing medical issues like severe spinal disease, and has endured 16 major surgeries, but she never misses her leaves. Therefore, it be it resolved that all members of this House wish Christine Daigle and her family all the best as they await to hear this Saturday if they are the winners of the contest grand prize of a $25,000 trip for six to any NHL city, with of course game tickets as part of the prize. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Thank you. There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the late Janelle Cameron, the godfather of Celtic music, will not soon be forgotten thanks to his many fans, musical colleagues, and the lives he has touched worldwide. Whereas Janelle has received many distinguished honours over his illustrious life and career. Whereas just this fall, Janelle Cameron was inducted posthumously into the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame in the Artists category. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Janelle's wife Angela and his family on his well-earned honour for a beloved Nova Scotian musician and extend our best wishes to them. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver of notice has been requested. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Minister for Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations employees have completed their annual Angel Tree program for the Salvation Army. Whereas Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations employees supplied gifts for over 200 children, double last year's total. And whereas Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations employees as a group actively support charities year-round, with this month's charity being the Salvation Army. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank and congratulate the employees in Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations for their continuing support for leading charities. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas ensuring public service employees are supported to do their best work is an important part of delivering quality programs and services to citizens. And whereas regular employee surveying helps us understand employees' perception and need so that we may develop innovative and effective human resource strategies. And whereas in 2005, the Nova Scotia Public Service Commission was among the founding public service organizations of the Employee Engagement Interjurisdictional Initiative, a team that received a Bronze Award from the Alberta Premier's Award of Excellence program on November 29, 2007. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House congratulate the staff of the Nova Scotia Public Service Commission and in particular Kathy Cox-Brown, Director of Evaluation and Audit, and her team, whose work benefits thousands of provincial public servants and all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian National Skills Competition held in Saskatoon in 2007 recognized 40 skills-related trades, and whereas the 42 competitors representing Nova Scotia at this competition brought home 9 bronze, 5 silver, and 2 gold medals, and whereas these competitors prepared diligently for this national event with the guidance of their mentors and trainers, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the 42 competitors on their outstanding performances as they represented Nova Scotia at the National Skills Competition. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Request for waiver of notice has been requested. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Highland Community Residential Services is a non-profit organization that provides living options in the community for people who have an intellectual disability and or long-term mental illness. And whereas HCRS is celebrating its 30th year of promoting independence and community participation for its residents in northern Nova Scotia. And whereas the Department of Community Services is pleased to support the wonderful work of HCRS and similar programs through important and influential funding, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the commitment and dedication of the approximate 100 staff of Highland Community Residential Services to the individuals they support, which in turn supports the goal of this government to help persons with disabilities meet their full potential each and every day. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable, the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Women's Institute of Nova Scotia is a well-respected community organization that supports local farmers and producers, and whereas this organization continues to educate and promote the benefits of fresh local food and encourages people to buy local products, and whereas the Women's Institute of Nova Scotia, along with the Rural Research Centre at the Nova Scotia Agriculture College, have developed a second Buy Local Food survey to gauge the buying habits and opinions of consumer practices. Therefore, be it resolved that the Women's Institutes of Nova Scotia be congratulated on their project, the Women's Institute Buy Local Challenge project, and wish them well in their awareness programs this fall and winter. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable, the Minister responsible for seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, the Honourable May-Ann E. Francis, announced in her inaugural speech last year her commitment to advancing 2 areas of interest, recognizing healthy communities and the wisdom of elders. And whereas an award, the Lieutenant Governor's Intergenerational Award, was created by the Department of Seniors to foster interaction and bonding between Nova Scotians of different ages by celebrating and promoting inspiring intergenerational programs existing in communities across the province. And whereas the Department of Seniors sponsors the Outstanding Volunteer Service Award, Older Generation. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate Doris Evans of Cherrybrook on receiving the Outstanding Volunteer Service Award, Older Generation, for a lifetime of service promoting the literacy of youth in her community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Janet Clark has been the long-standing Chief Librarian of the South Shore Regional Library System, and whereas Janet Clark has worked diligently to provide the best service possible to the residents of Lunenburg and Queens counties through the mobile libraries and branch locations, and whereas Janet Clark has recently retired as Chief Librarian after 23 years of dedication to rural Nova Scotia, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House extend best wishes to Janet Clark on her retirement and thank her for her leadership and dedication to the South Shore Regional Library System. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the most venerable order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem is a working order of charitably minded men and women whose philanthropy is expressed principally through its two foundations, the St. John Eye Hospital in Jerusalem and St. John Ambulance. And whereas St. John Ambulance Canada is a charitable organization whose mission is to enable Canadians to improve their health, safety, and quality of life by providing training and community service, and in addition, this organization supports the Hospital of St. John in Jerusalem by providing for the services of a surgeon and supplying optical equipment and funds for special projects. And whereas this past June, Assistant Commissioner Ian Atkins, the highest-ranking member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Nova Scotia, was presented the Order of St. John by the Governor-General of Canada, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Assistant Commissioner Atkins on this prestigious honour and thank him for his many years of service to the people of Nova Scotia and Canada. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable the Member for Timberley Prospect.
Mr. Speaker, I introduce this bill on behalf of my colleague from Halifax Needham, an act entitled An Act to Prevent the Separation of Couples in Need of Nursing Home Health Care.
Thank you. The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Prevent the Separation of Couples in Need of Nursing Home Health Care. Or that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 356 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Private Investigators and Private Guards Act.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 356 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Private Investigators and Private Guards Act.
Bill 88, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 356 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Private Investigators and Private Guards Act.
Or that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Establish the Nova Scotia Voluntary Carbon Offsets Fund.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Establish the Nova Scotia Voluntary Carbon Offsets Fund.
Bill 89, entitled An Act to Establish the Nova Scotia Voluntary Carbon Offsets Fund.
Or that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statute 1989, the Assessment Act, to exempt renewable energy production facilities from property tax.
Thank you. The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Assessment Act, to exempt renewable energy production facilities from property tax.
Bill 90,
person has a petition to be missed.
1989, the Assessment Act to exempt renewable energy production facilities from property tax.
Order that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 2 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Adult Protection Act.
Thank you. The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 2 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Adult Protection Act.
Bill 91, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 2 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Adult Protection Act.
Order that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll be introducing this bill on behalf of the member from Richmond. I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Thank you. The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill 92, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be read a second time on a future day. Further bills? There's been a request to revert to tabling petition. Is it agreed? Agreed. The honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, permission to make an introduction before I table the petition?
Please do.
Seated in the West Gallery, we have Windsor Junction residents Wendy and Gerald Breon, and I would like if the House would give them a warm welcome as they are. I beg leave, Mr. Speaker, to table a petition calling for the government to do something with respect to after-hours employees in the light of panic buttons or no one person working alone. This petition was circulated and by Wendy Breon, where she's received over 1,000 signatures, and I have affixed my name to it.
The petition is tabled. Notices of motion. Notices of motion. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jack and Ian Doucette, the sons of Colleen and Dennis Doucette of Halliburton Hills, collected donations in their neighborhood raising funds for World Vision. Whereas this money will help families in Uganda. Whereas Jack and Ian also contributed personally from their piggy banks. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognize the initiative of Jack and Ian and congratulate them both on their initiative and hard work in raising funds for impoverished families in Uganda through World Vision. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in recently released Statistics Canada census data, we see that Nova Scotia had a net loss of 8,005 people to interprovincial migration, and whereas Cape Breton, and in particular Cape Breton Regional Municipality, account for more than 80% of the oat migration facing this province, and whereas oat migration can play a devastating role on the local economy and business community, the healthcare system, and other various programs, therefore be it resolved that the Premier and his government recognize the issue of interprovincial migration and work towards addressing this disturbing trend. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. I hear a no. The motion is tabled. Okay. I get different directions here. There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It is agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jordan Newcomb has been golfing since the age of 8 and is showing his athletic prowess in the sport more and more every year. And whereas Jordan, who is now a grade 10 student at Evanview High and is presently one of the top-ranked juvenile-age golfers in Nova Scotia. And whereas Jordan had an incredible 2007 season on the links, being the #1 Nova Scotian and placing 7th overall in the Nike Canadian Junior Golf Tour, while also winning the 2007 junior and juvenile titles at Avon Valley, placing 2nd at the Kenwo Junior Championship, 5th at the juvenile category, and 10th overall at the Nova Scotia Junior Provincials, while finishing 4th at the East Coast Junior Championships in the juvenile division. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House today applaud Jordan Newcomb, who went well beyond all expectations in 2007, and wish him continued success as he ardently strives toward earning a golf scholarship to university. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Janet T. DeMaurier of Shelburne County, Nova Scotia, has volunteered for the past 8 years at Hillcrest Academy School, and whereas T can be found in the school anytime, faithfully helping any way she can, from running photocopies, faxes, answering phones, decorating for Christmas, as well as helping with school concerts. And whereas T is a secretary for the Home in School, she is a part of the school's accreditation process and sits on the School Advisory Council. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Janet T. DeMaurier as a cheerful, dependable volunteer, ready to help at all times, being greatly appreciated by Hillcrest Academy School. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a recently released book, Black Women Who Made a Difference in Nova Scotia, is a collection of stories from 56 local black women. And whereas the editor of the book, Dolly Williams, is also honoured in this book. And whereas the voices of a generation of black women who have made their mark in our communities are no longer silent with this book release. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House of Assembly recognize the 56 local black women who have made a difference in Nova Scotia and congratulate Dolly Williams and the local chapter of the Congress of Black Women for producing this marvelous book. And I'd ask for waiver.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas legendary senior hockey player Frank Danke Dorrington was recently inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame, whereas the New Glasgow resident is remembered primarily for his effort in the early days of senior hockey in Newfoundland and Labrador, where he was inducted into that province Hall of Fame in 1988. Whereas the great stick handler is remembered for his enthusiasm and attitude throughout his 17-year career and joined other inductees, including Stanley Cup winner Wendell Young, Canadian curling champion Penny LaRocque, and former Major League Baseball players Charles Smith and Fred Lake. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send their sincere congratulations to Frank Danke Dorrington on being inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame, as we recognize the many and various achievements of those who call Nova Scotia home. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Highland Community Residential Services was established in 1977 and is committed to ensuring inclusion in community life for persons with an intellectual disability or dealing with mental health issues. And whereas Highland Community Residential Services provides personalized supports promoting wellness, personal dignity, and human rights through residentially based services that include a supervised apartment program, small options for children, a summer day program for children with intellectual disabilities, and an independent living support program. And whereas Highland Community Residential Services has grown from one developmental home supporting 9 persons to programs to support 68 persons through its residential services, and supports an additional 180 persons through its Northern Region Respite Service, and Highland Community Residential Services celebrated its 30th anniversary in November of this year. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly commend the more than 100 people who have served on the Highland Community Residential Services Board since 1977 for their dedication, and commend the staff at Highland Community Residential Services for their continuing efforts to support the needs of intellectually disabled adults and children in Pictou County and the northern region of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 2007 Chronicle Herald and Global Maritime's Raise a Reader campaign took place on October 3rd, and whereas this year's event was a tremendous success, raising over $7,000 for literacy programs across the province, and whereas there were many community leaders and volunteers stationed at corners throughout HRM handing out copies of the Chronicle Herald in exchange for donations to this literacy campaign, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate all those involved in making this year's event so successful and wish this campaign great success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Victoria of the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Smoky Elementary School student 7-year-old Owen Fricker was diagnosed with type 1 juvenile diabetes 1 year ago, and whereas more than 200,000 Canadians have juvenile onset diabetes who are insulin dependent, and whereas following his diagnosis, Owen explained to his parents, Trish and Lance Fricker, that he wanted to do something to help find a cure, and ended up raising more than $4,200 with support from his parents, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and the Cape Smoky Elementary School students, as they all assisted Owen with his Walk to Cure campaign. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize that Canada has the 3rd highest occurrence rate of type 1 diabetes in children 14 years of age or younger, and applaud Owen, his family, and fellow students, along with the Nova Scotia branch of the Canadian Juvenile Diabetes Foundation for their dynamic fundraising efforts. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Waverley residents Edward and Marjorie Andrews, who met when they were both 18 years old at the North Star Rowing and Paddling Club in Dartmouth, celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary on the 22nd of October 2007. And whereas Edward and Marjorie Andrews celebrated their remarkable milestone with many close friends and family, including their 4 children, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Edward and Marjorie Andrews on their 70th wedding anniversary and recognize their commitment and loyalty to one another over the past 7 decades. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It is agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jonathan Thompson of Weymouth, Nova Scotia is a fine example of what determination, faith, and the support of others can do. And whereas at the age of 4, Jonathan was diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, a disorder which affects the development and generation of muscle tissue in the body. And whereas Jonathan overcame this adversity in May of 2006, he graduated from St. Mary's University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology in May of this year, and he was given the title of Honorary Pastor of the New Tusket Baptist Church in recognition of his faithful service in the church and in the inspiration he gives to others. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize the accomplishments of Jonathan Thompson and wish him success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It's agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Minister for Immigration.
Morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Project China is a program conducted by the Halifax Regional School Board and the Government of China to allow 60 grade 8 students to attend school in our province, and whereas 8 of these students attend Bedford South School and are integrated into regular classes where they share with our students Chinese culture through activities and events. Whereas these students will leave a lasting impression of the Chinese culture and on our students and their host families. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House welcome these Chinese students from Suzhou, China, and thank them for bringing their culture into our classroom and community. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It is agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Construction Nova Scotia is an event in which teams construct sculptures out of donated canned goods, eventually donating the building materials to Feed Nova Scotia, and whereas the 19 teams participating in this year's event collected 48,000 cans of food and over $30,000 for Feed Nova Scotia, and whereas presentations included one by the First Baptist Church of Halifax entitled Loaves and Fishes, a project which underlined the congregation's continuing commitment to meeting the spiritual and sustenance needs of our community. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Feed Nova Scotia and all the organizers and participants of Construction Nova Scotia 2007, including the First Baptist Church of Halifax, for putting their faith into practice by helping to feed the hungry in their time of need. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It's agreed. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sandra Cameron of Glace Bay, an employee with Air Canada Jazz, helped with the Dreams Take Flight program. And whereas Sandra assisted with the finalization of the plans for the Dreams Take Flight program, which enabled 100 children from across Atlantic Canada to visit Disney World in Florida. 4 of the children were from the Glace Bay and Reserve Mines area. And whereas the program is made up of many volunteers of the Air Canada family and is organized by a non-profit organization along with the help of business and organizations throughout Atlantic Canada, and locally $2,000 was raised. Therefore, be it resolved, members of the House of Assembly congratulate Sandra Cameron for her participation in organizing this year's event. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas each year, on the feast of St. Francis Xavier, also known as St. FX Day, the university holds its X-ring investiture ceremony. And whereas students look forward to the opportunity when they can first wear their X rings, almost as eagerly as they do for the actual receipt of their diploma, holding a countdown to the event at least a year in advance. And whereas this year more than 1,000 students received their X rings while proud alumni, family, and friends looked on, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House salute this unique tradition of this esteemed educational institution and salute this year's recipients of their X-ring and wish them well in their future pursuits. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I have a complementary resolution. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas St. FX's alumni is one of the strongest organizations with active members across the world, and whereas the X-ring symbolizes more than a degree, it is a symbol of belonging to a much larger association, and whereas Ed McHugh, who graduated in 1979, is now the president of the St. FX Alumni Association, where he will work to promote the university and keep the spirit of X strong. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Ed McHugh and wish him continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? It is agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on June 23, 2007, at the campus of St. Anne's University in Tuscot, they held their graduation exercises. And whereas 5 certificates were awarded for special education teacher's aid and 1 certificate in continuing health care. And whereas Juanita Surratt received her certificate as a special education teacher's aide and was also the valedictorian for the class, therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Juanita Surratt in obtaining her diploma and wish her much success in her newly chosen career. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bob Mellish of Halifax has been appointed to join the Consular Corps in Nova Scotia as the Honorary Consul of Iceland in Halifax, and whereas throughout his legal career Mr. Mellish has worked on behalf of Icelandic clients in Canada, and whereas in his new role Mr. Mellish will now be responsible for furthering the interests of Iceland and the Icelandic nationals living in Nova Scotia, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Bob Mellish on his appointment as Honorary Consul of Iceland in Halifax and wish him continued success in all of his endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver of notice. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. Is there any further notice of motion? The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to request the consent of the House to go into the Committee of the Whole House on bills.
There's been a request to return to the Committee on the Whole House on bill. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion?
Mr. Speaker, and to add those bills to the order paper.
So the request has been to return to the Committee on the Whole on the House on bills and add the bills to the order paper. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. Order, please. Order, please. The committee. Order, please. Order, please. The Committee of the Whole House on Bills is now called to order. The chair now recognizes the Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you please call Bill number 11, an act respecting civil forfeiture of property?
Bill number 11. Shall the clause carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you please call Bill number 12, an act to amend Chapter 154 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Evidence Act?
Bill number 12. Shall the clause carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Thank you. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, would you please call Bill number 13, an act to amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 2000, the Probate Act?
Bill number 13.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, please call Bill number 15, an act to amend Chapter 430 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Small Claims Court Act.
Bill number 15.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, please call Bill number 27, an act to amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act.
Bill number 27.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, please call Bill number 39, an act to amend Chapter 399 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Rental Property Conversion Act.
Again, no amendments.
No amendments on Bill number 39. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Carry. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Bill number 41, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Bill number 41.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Thank you. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Bill number 43, an act to amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act.
Bill number 43.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Carry. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Bill number 49, an act to amend Chapter 71 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act.
Bill number 49. No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Carry. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill number 52, an act to amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994, the Credit Union Act.
Bill number 52.
No amendments.
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Thank you. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would move now, request that we do move back into government business today and report progress.
Report progress. Is there agree? Agree. Order, please.
The chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports that the committee has met and considered the following bills.
11, 12, 13, 15, 27, 39, 41, 43, 49, and 52. And the Chairman's been instructed to recommend them to the favorable consideration of the House, each without amendment.
Or that these bills be read a third time on a future day. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Bill number 63, the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act.
Bill number 63, Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act. The Honourable, the Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to bring forward amendments to the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act. And, Mr. Speaker, what this act does, it lays out the taxation framework for Halifax Regional Municipality and the Imperial Oil Refinery. Earlier this year, Mr. Speaker, the parties were negotiating taxes, and they asked my department to review the legislation and to clarify any existing ambiguities. And in 2004, the act was changed, and I'll get into the history of that in a few minutes, but in the legislation that was then adopted, there were differences of interpretation by HRM and Imperial. So the parties came to the department, my department, and asked if we would review the legislation to see if these parts which were, I guess we'll say, subject to interpretation could be clarified in a way that was acceptable to both parties. So I tell you that, Mr. Speaker, to explain that the amendments that are being debated today are the result of consultations and discussions with both the Halifax Regional Municipality and the Imperial Oil Refinery. And what they really do, these amendments, Mr. Speaker, is to reflect a tax agreement, a municipal tax agreement that was reached and negotiated by the two parties involved, the Halifax Regional Municipality and Imperial Oil Refinery Limited. Now, these amendments do a number of things, and first of all, they will clarify the wording as it relates to local area rates. And to be quite frank, Mr. Speaker, when I mentioned that there was some difference in interpretation of the original 2004 legislation by the parties, the difference in interpretation revolved basically around area rates. And the interpretation of Imperial Oil was that they didn't have to pay them, that they were part of the package that had been negotiated in 2004. And the position of the city was that they were outside that agreement and that Imperial Oil was subject to them. That has now been clarified, Mr. Speaker, and there will be no more debate about whether area rates are included or whether area rates aren't included. The second thing this amendment does, Mr. Speaker, these amendments do, is to set a base payment to HRM of about $3.6 million annually for the Imperial Oil Refinery beginning in the taxation year 2007 and 2008 and running until 2011 and 2012. And Mr. Speaker, I look at that amount of money and I think of my own constituency and how we would love to have one business that was contributing $3.6 million to the taxation base. The third thing, Mr. Speaker, is to establish a method for increasing Imperial's municipal taxes if one of its competitors reaches a similar taxation level. And at that point, Mr. Speaker, I just want to deviate a little bit and give the House a few comparisons. The issue of taxing refineries has not only been a problem here in Nova Scotia, it's been right across Canada, and you know, becomes public every once in a while. The situation in Nova Scotia for Imperial Oil was this, is that prior to 2003, Imperial Oil was taxed on the value of its property, its buildings, and its equipment. In 2003, Imperial Oil invested $80 million to upgrade the refinery, which was required to meet new federal guidelines associated with the production of ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel. So they put $80,000 into the operation to meet federal guidelines. Now, the $80 million that was invested did not significantly increase production, which is about 88,000 barrels per day. However, because they had put $80 million into improving the structure to meet federal guidelines, yeah, I see that. Yeah. The subsequent reassessment in taxes saw Imperial's tax bill jump from $2.6 to $6.2 million. And if I do the mathematics on that, I think that's about $3.6 million increase in taxes. Not too bad. And at that point, the department got involved. And in part because at that time, an additional $80 million upgrade was put on hold by Imperial pending the resolution of the tax issue. And the department at that point tried to determine the best way to establish a tax rate and a tax base for the municipality. So what it did is, as my department does, it's a very thorough department, so they went across Canada and took a look at how other refineries were taxed. Now, what they found was that there was really no particular pattern. So in their wisdom, and it was wise, I think, they decided, well, let's take a look at the taxes per barrel of production. And that was the method that was finally established. And I just want to give you some examples of the cross-country comparisons that were found when they were doing this for the purpose of this review in 2006, 2007. In Dartmouth, Imperial was paying $41 per barrel. The Petro-Canada refinery in Montreal was paying $26 per barrel. The Imperial refinery in Sarnia paying $25 per barrel. The Shell refinery in Montreal was paying $23 per barrel. In St. John, New Brunswick, which is the other source of most of our petroleum here in Nova Scotia, the Irving refinery in St. John is tax bill equivalent $17 per barrel. In Lévis, Quebec, the Ultramar refinery there is paying $15 per barrel. In Sarnia, Ontario, the Shell refinery is paying $11 per barrel. The Sunoco refinery, which is also in Sarnia, $10 per barrel. And the Imperial refinery in Nanticoke, Ontario, the municipal taxes are $9 per barrel. So I say this information is based on 2005, or it's 2005 information. It was done by the department to try and establish some groundwork as we prepared to review the legislation and come to the amendments that you have in front of you this morning. So clearly,
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Yes, I was just wondering if the minister would be kind enough to table that information.
Thank you. The information is tabled. The Honourable, the Minister of Service of Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
So thank you. Anyway, so Mr. Speaker, back to this. So there was a fair bit of research done, and the compromise, and it was a compromise, that was reached by Imperial and HRM, I think is a good one for the parties involved. And the ability to change the establishment method for increasing the municipal taxes if one of the competitors reaches a similar taxation level. And I gave you those numbers. You can see that there has to be considerable catch-up, you know, for this 5-year, in a 5-year period for it to change, to be quite frank. However, it is built in there. If the taxes of the other refineries rise, then there is the ability to for these folks to come to an agreement to raise the tax structure for Imperial here in Nova Scotia, and the minister would be involved in that. The whole point of this exercise was to try and find an appropriate measure that would reflect and protect Imperial's relative comparative position and competitive position when compared to other Eastern Canadian refineries. So in 2004, obviously HRM wanted more, but the province passed the Act in 2004, which set those taxes based on a per barrel proxy. The result of that was, Mr. Speaker, in 2005, that Imperial did go ahead with phase 2 of the upgrade, which was another $80 million. And I want to just add, Mr. Speaker, that over 70% of that work was done by local people and local contractors and companies. That money, 70% of that money, basically went directly into the economy of HRM and the surrounding areas from where the workers and the companies would have come. And Imperial did acknowledge at that time that this... Yeah, please. Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, the Premier. Yeah. No.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Premier, on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for giving me a moment of his time. I want to take the opportunity to welcome a couple of guests here in the East Gallery, a couple of individuals who are from Inverness County, in fact over in Dartmouth at the present time, and are good friends to many, some others in this house as well. Mr. Speaker, and actually the gentleman I'm going to introduce was a former page here in the House a number of years ago as well, during the time of Dr. Jim McLean when he was the MLA in this House. So I'd like to welcome Eddie and Marie Copley to the House of Assembly, and a former page of the House. Welcome.
The Honourable, the Minister responsible for Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
I too welcome the Copleys to the House, and if I remember correctly, Premier, as the Deputy Premier and I were talking about, they had a son, Randy. It was a pretty fair hockey player, I think. Is that correct? Yes, indeed. Drafted by New York, is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, the Bruins, I.
The Bruins could have used Randy last night.
Bill number 63, right? The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Perhaps you could bring the government minister back to the bill and avoid the rabbit tracks from other people in the House today.
So much for the hockey game last night.
Mr. Speaker, I always go with your rulings. You were wise beyond your years, but we have a bill under discussion here.
Thank you, sir. We'll return to Bill 63. The Honourable Minister for Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, well, you know, I do remember when the Bruins were a force some time ago.
About the same time the Maple Leafs were.
Yeah, about the same time. I know. Actually, I think it was before the Premier was born, I think is what he said. And what it was But, you know, that was back in the days of Fleming McKell, and you remember it was about 40 years ago that he played senior hockey in New Glasgow, so. Mr. Speaker, anyway, to get back to this important piece of legislation is that Imperial did go ahead with phase 2 of that upgrade, another $80 million into the local economy. And as important here in Nova Scotia is we have a reliable and dependable source of fuel for our province. Mr. Speaker, we used to have an Ultramar refinery down the strait that closed, and we had a refinery, another refinery, I believe, out in Eastern Passage, Ultramar, and it closed. Mr. Speaker, we have in Atlantic, or at least in Maritime Canada, we've got the Irving refinery and we have the Imperial refinery, and we're pretty lucky to have that facility here. It does provide most of the petroleum products which are just sold and distributed here in Nova Scotia. For all of the companies, there is some Irving product that does come in the northern end of the province, but basically a good deal of that product that we have and that secure supply that we have in Nova Scotia does come from that Imperial Oil refinery over there in Eastern Passage. And just, Mr. Speaker, before I close, I want to make two other points. I think it's worth noting, Mr. Speaker, that under that agreement is that Imperial's taxes jumped by $1 million annually, and that will be ongoing. And the other thing in this amendment, Mr. Speaker, with the amendment, is that in light of the discussion about the interpretation of area rates and whatnot, Imperial made a one-time payment, or will make a one-time payment of $450,000 to the Halifax Regional Municipality. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that this legislation keeps Imperial as the highest tax refinery in Eastern Canada, but it also provides them with certainty in this tax payment for the next 5 years. Mr. Speaker, with those few words of explanation, I now move second reading of Bill number 63, the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll start with certainly thanking the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations for bringing this to the floor, the Act to amend the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act. Mr. Speaker, it's not news to many of the members of this chamber, that there's significant history on this particular issue. Indeed, as the Honourable Minister mentioned, in 2004, much discussion and debate around the decisions and the cap around taxation for the refinery. They were thought to have resolved the issue, the tax issues associated with Imperial Oil, but clearly we can say it didn't quite cut it. So here we are again, Mr. Speaker. Before I offer my comments on the bill, which generally are certainly supportive, I want to highlight the importance, Mr. Speaker, of the sustainability of this refinery to the people of my riding, and I think it's safe to say on behalf of my colleague in caucus and the member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley as well. Many of the 210 employees at this refinery are residents of our ridings, and to be clear, resolving these issues, Mr. Speaker, are important to their quality of life, to their sense of stability for their jobs. I'd like to go on the record, Mr. Speaker, as well as saying, really, from my perspective, that I want to note the tremendous corporate entity that Imperial Oil is in the Dartmouth communities, and those that surround it. I believe them to be very responsive, generous at a very local level, and financially they contribute to many projects. In particular, Mr. Speaker, they are the sole provider of a breakfast program at the South Woodside Community School, and it's an asset to that community that is, as we all know, is tremendously important. They are an engaging corporate entity with the community on environmental, safety, communication strategy. They do everything they can, Mr. Speaker, to be a good corporate entity for those communities that host them. I think we need to commend them for that, Mr. Speaker. Often a refinery of this size and the nature of the business that's being done there, they can be looked at potentially as a big bad refinery. But from my perspective, having represented the area as the local councillor for the past 3 years, I think they're very good corporate entity, and they're good to that community. I think that's worth noting, and I'd like to be on the record. While representing this area over the past 3 years as the councillor, I worked very hard, Mr. Speaker, to mend a fractured relationship between HRM and the Imperial Oil Dartmouth refinery. The former plant manager, Brian Fairley, was very committed to this goal, and he worked with me to that end, and I believe we were successful. And I think that the bill and the efforts that have recently gone and the discussions that have gone on with the current manager, Janet Matsushita, is evidence of that. HRM and the staff there have come to a solution on the clarity of the area rates, the taxation issues, and those that affect it. This is a significant amount of money that's on the table, Mr. Speaker. It's an important issue to the municipality. This bill clarifies the expectation of tax payments for the refinery, and it creates a 5-year agreement for future tax rates. What this does, Mr. Speaker, is it gives both sides, both stakeholders, a sense of certainty for their budgets. Both rely on that certainty. Mayor Kelly was recently quoted in the papers recently as stating that the council of the day is not entirely satisfied with this arrangement. No doubt that's correct. The discussions around the table, certainly when I was there, would attest to that. But they do see it as a way forward, Mr. Speaker. It's important that I guess the mayor has suggested there's still a dissatisfaction with the former legislation that was on the table, and they see this as a better scenario than that cap, that previous cap. The lump sum payment of $450,000 settles, although a shortfall, it settles an arrears of debt. And no doubt, I have confidence in the councillors at HRM that they'll put this money to good use in the communities that they serve. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see that this movement is going forward, and certainly I was very supportive of it while on council, and I'm pleased to see it now go to law amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to say a few words today about Bill 63, which is an amendment to the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act, which was passed here just a few years ago. Mr. Speaker, I well remember the debate that took place around that original bill, and it was opposed by HRM very vigorously, also by CBRM. They came here to law amendments, and the UNSM. And they had all, their main concern was that this bill was the provincial government moving in to alter an established method of assessments. And that was done in this one instance to cover the LNG plants and even then, most specifically, the Imperial Oil Refinery. And it was done to address competitiveness, as the minister has said today. That same argument holds true today as it did then, the need to maintain the refinery. But I think it's important to note that this is altering the way we handle taxation municipally, and that on that principle, the Liberal caucus last time round had voted against the bill, and in fact, all of the NDP caucus had voted against the original bill, with the exception of the member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. So it was one that, on principle, is actually monkeying with something that shouldn't be changed as as a basis of certainty for municipalities. However, Mr. Speaker, the need for competitiveness and keeping that refinery open was clear. And at the time, and I still feel it's worth noting, there are other tools that the the provincial government has that can be used to support industry. We have NSBI that works with industry. We have the Office of Economic Development. We have a strategic infrastructure fund that can be identified. And the province itself has its own taxation that can play a role. I noted when the minister said that there have been 2 large investments in the plant. That's very good news for Nova Scotia to have a company that continues to invest and improve their facilities and look for efficiencies. But here in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, we have a tax that goes on capital improvements, and it's an investment tax that we put onto large companies that choose to upgrade and invest in their facilities. And that's a very regressive tax. It holds back the province rather than moving it forward. So those are the kind of tools that the province has to encourage people to stay here and new companies to come here that we can address ourselves. I also wanted to mention that in the debate last time round in 2004, the government had promised that they were going to do an overall review. I'd like to find the exact words, but they said they were going to review the taxation for large industrial taxpayers. I said they undertake a review of the province's assessment and taxation policies of heavy industrial properties was the wording that was used. And I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, whether or not that review was ever undertaken. And I just wanted to raise it today in the hopes that perhaps the minister will look to see if that has been done, and if not, I think it's still topical. I think it's still important, and I would ask that we do look at doing exactly that, because we're creating an exception for this one facility, and others can follow and perhaps ask for the same thing. So we should have a plan and an approach that is well understood by all industries in the province. I think that's only fair, because this bill will allow certainty and stability for the refinery and for HRM in this case, but there are other facilities and other industries that will not have the same certainty. So I think it's just good to know that a review could be done. I think that would be very important. I certainly support the idea of this bill. I think it's different than previously, because HRM has now come to at least to a working relationship with the refinery. They've come to terms with it. The $3.6 million a year gives a significant amount of money to the tax base, which is important. As was mentioned, the refinery in Cole Harbour Eastern Passage is employing 210 people. So that's a significant amount of employment, and we all know the multiplier effect of those dollars, the number of other jobs that are dependent upon good industrial jobs in our community. So we certainly understand the importance of supporting a good employer within the community and seeing that this refinery stays. There are bigger industrial concerns as well about having a stable supply of oil that is here in our province, so that we are not dependent on other provinces for the refineries, and for our supply of gasoline and fuels. So I think that is important, as well as a strategic aspect of our province and our industrial base. And that, I'm sure, factored into the original bill, and it probably is very much a factor today. Mr. Speaker, there's some question around any future LNG plants that we may attract to our province. And I just want to mention that the bill covers that, but only in a general way. It says that in future, if we have an LNG plant in Nova Scotia, the municipal taxation rates will be determined by regulation. So again, it does leave it wide open. It can come whenever at that time. At this point in time, again, HRM seems to have accepted the arrangement. The agreement to give them a one-time payment of $450,000 is a compromise with the municipality, who felt they were entitled to some area rates, which they would apply to all businesses and all commercial properties and residences in the municipality. So because that's been denied and argued by the refinery, they've gone ahead with a one-time payment, which they're calling a goodwill payment. I hope that the municipality will use that wisely, because it's not often you get a payment that comes out of the blue. And in this case, I know there are many pressing needs, but I hope they will use it to help support the other taxpayers of this municipality, who do carry the lion's share of the load. And as I said, we're in agreement with the changes. We've spoken to HRM, and we understand that it's in everyone's best interest to move forward with this issue. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to it going to law amendments, and I will take my closing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize the honourable member for Halifax Needham on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, I'd like to draw your attention to the West Gallery, where we have high school students from Shambhala School in the north end of Halifax, and they are accompanied by their teacher, Cynthia Moore, and I would ask them to stand and receive the warm reception of the House.
Thank you. The honourable member from Dartmouth South Portland Valley on an introduction.
No, I wanted to speak on the bill.
Pardon me. Okay, on Bill 63. The honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased just to take a few minutes to speak on Bill 63. As has been mentioned earlier, I think the opposition party struggled with the original legislation because we hated to see exceptions made to the taxation procedures and guidelines within the province, although we understood the very unique and difficult situation that the Imperial Oil Refinery was in. So I'm very pleased to see that the refinery officials and HRM, Halifax Regional Municipality, have reached an understanding whereby they're clarifying their position, and at least it will provide some consistency and stability and knowledge of what's coming down the road for at least the next 5 years by both the Municipal Council and the refinery. I wanted to mention that the refinery is actually in Dartmouth South Portland Valley, although its workers certainly live in a number of different or neighboring constituencies. The Imperial Oil Refinery has been a significant employer in our area, and it has an excellent track record. It's been a leader in worker safety. It's actually had 5.5 million hours without serious injury, and I think that's quite a record. We're very pleased. It's an industry that could put neighborhoods at risk, and they have done a lot to both ensure the safety of the neighboring South Woodside and North Woodside communities, and also Shearwater on the other side. They hold regular meetings with community leaders and community members to both update them on information regarding changes at the refinery, and also to answer any questions about safety. It's been mentioned that it's a major employer. Over 200 citizens of our province work at the refinery, and on average about 70 contract workers per year. Certainly during the two extensive upgrades over the last several years, that number has increased. And it's an economic catalyst for not only the Metro Halifax area, but certainly Nova Scotia generally, because it's put in hundreds of millions of dollars investment. And it has a long history of support for community endeavors. It's been a major supporter of the local North Woodside Elementary School. It's supported the Natal Day SO Talent Show, Neptune Theatre, the Discovery Centre, Phoenix Centre, the SO Hockey, Atlantic Bantam AAA Hockey Tournament, the various initiatives of the IWK. And significantly, it's partnered with the Nova Scotia Community College to create a world-class training course for its employees, which has benefited both other Nova Scotians and potential workers for the refinery. So I just want to be on record that I certainly support fair and consistent taxation. I'm really pleased to see two major economic stimulants or catalysts in our province, HRM and the Imperial Oil Refinery, reach an agreement clarifying the interpretation of the original bill. And this refinery has been actually in Dartmouth since 1918. So it's approaching, you know, nearly 100 years of operation within our province, and I think we have to protect its future in our province. We do need a local source of petroleum products. It's a major employer. It invests heavily in our economy and in our communities, and we're very proud to have this refinery in Nova Scotia. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an important bill to the refinery in Eastern Passage. I think it's an important bill to Nova Scotians. The last bill that would come forward here, I didn't support. I didn't support because it transferred the tax burden on the residents of HRM, about $1 million a year. That was, I thought, really regressive taxing. The issue, and I still hold that contention, but at the same time, and I'm very pleased with the information that the minister supplied upon the per barrel price of taxes as compared to taxes, and you look at Imperial Oil as the highest in Eastern Canada, and if I was building a new refinery, I definitely wouldn't locate it in HRM. That's without question, because that's one major factor that of your operating costs you would have to take into consideration. So I think it's time we really looked at all the taxation within HRM in particular and in the province. I see so many people losing their homes to property taxes now they can't pay on a fixed income. The taxes keep going up and up and up because huge assessments. And I again want to thank the minister for adopting a process we went through last year to fix the increase in assessments at the Consumer Price Index, and I was very pleased that they accepted that idea from our caucus and moved forward with it, because the old system of assessment caps really was just sham, to say the least. Over 6 years, your taxes would double anyway, so it really was no tax break to the individuals. And most people have seen tax increases in twofold, threefold, fourfold on your property taxes. And then you see companies like Moyer's Candy Factory packing up and leaving Dartmouth. A company that's been in Nova Scotia since they first started a couple of 100 years ago. And I'm certainly sure that one of the factors they left this area for was high property taxes, among other high costs. And unfortunately, we can't afford to lose businesses like that because of high taxes. And I'm really pleased to see that the municipality and Imperial Oil and through the department have worked out a deal. I still think it's a very good deal for the company or the taxpayers of HRM. We're all going to share the burden of this as it goes through. But at the same time, it's very important to keep a good corporate citizen like Imperial Oil here. And that was our intention last year as well. We have no ill feelings toward Imperial Oil. I think they're excellent people and excellent people to work with, and it's shown by the willingness to pay higher property taxes than anyone else in Eastern Canada. So it says a lot for them to stay here in Eastern Passage and Woodside area, actually, not Eastern Passage. It's it's good to see this, but at the same time, this brings up a much bigger issue of taxation for businesses here in Nova Scotia. Property taxes, we've seen a very regressive bill put forward by the government on windmills, that windmills are going to be taxed on their capability of producing power, whether they produce it or not. It's going to put a huge impact. It's a regressive step towards green energy. And when you look at all these things and look at property tax, we have to raise taxes to provide services for our municipalities. That has to be done in a very efficient way. And I think there can be improvements made. I know when I sat on regional council, there was some things that went through there that I didn't agree with. And then when you look at our tax dollars going to the failed attempt for the Commonwealth Games, I think that was very unfortunate, and a lot of time wasted on trivial issues that really should be redirected to issues that will help us as residents of HRM and help us as Nova Scotians. Because if we don't have a strong economy here, and a strong economy supported by business like Imperial Oil or Moyer's Candy Factory that now probably gone out of this province for good, or the Trenton Works or whatever other companies are here, our economy is slowly going to slow down. And when it does slow down, all these things that, all these major things that we should be doing, and like the Commonwealth Games, if we had the money to do it, and the facilities in place, or most of the facilities to start with, it probably would make sense. But starting from scratch and having nothing, and a huge bill like that, we certainly couldn't afford as a province or as a municipality, although we spent millions of dollars finding that out. I think we should have come to that conclusion much sooner than before we spent the millions of dollars. And well, basically, in HRM, probably all the taxes paid in 1 year are going to go to that Commonwealth Games blunder, I would say. Money that could have fixed roads, put sewers in, done a lot of things that would have been very, very helpful to all residents of HRM, improve the traffic situation, which is getting worse and worse and worse in HRM, with little effort to correct that situation. So as you go through this, you know, I'm glad to see that the municipality and the oil refinery have come to an agreement. It's an agreement will cost the property tax owners in the province some money, but not in the province, but HRM. So if you'll have a property, just sort of keep that in mind when you're paying your tax bill, along with all the extra charges they put on for area rates and some of the things I've talked about here before in this House. But so we've got to come to a balance with this, and I think the approach that the department took with this, looking at the price per barrel, is a very fair way to do it, and the fact that the minister through regulation can change this, I think that's positive too. I'm not really always positive on regulations, because you never know what they're going to be. So when you look at these things, I think it's a chance to adapt to whatever situation the refinery might find themselves in, and we indeed want to keep that capability here, want to keep those jobs here, and the fact that a lot of expansion work going on here is fantastic too. Even a larger expansion would be nice in that facility if we could set the structure to make that happen, and hopefully the government will work with the refinery to see if we can't make that happen, especially as the price of fuel goes up, and there's and all the problems we've had with refineries in the U.S. again puts our value of fuel up, and as we've seen by the high gas prices we pay. And I won't go into that today, but that's actually a problem that we have here, that we pay higher taxes here and higher gas prices than we do in New Brunswick or Prince Edward Island. But that's a discussion for another day. But all in all, I think this is a compromise. It's a bill that I think should have been here probably the previous time rather than this time. A negotiated settlement is always better than a forced settlement. And it seems to do what you need to do. Again, the only concerns I have with it, when you take away tax revenue from the municipality, they've either got to cut costs or that someone else pays the bill. So that's what's going to happen here. I think someone else is going to pay this bill, and we'll pay it either way if they don't make an arrangement with Imperial Oil. If they decide to leave our area, as the Texaco refinery did, then we lose that tax revenue. So it's always a balance. It's a difficult balance to achieve, and I commend the people that have worked towards that balance, and hopefully we'll see more economic growth in our area and a more sensible tax system that will allow people to live and stay in Nova Scotia. And with the recent meeting we have with the Home Builders Association, they indicated that it costs more to live in Nova Scotia now than it does in Alberta. So that's a bit of a worry, and that's an advantage we had for a while. So that's going to make it even more attractive for people to leave here, and again, our economy will suffer. It's unfortunate, but these things happen. But we have to take aggressive steps to get this resolved, and I don't see those steps being taken now either by the government or by the regional municipality. With those few words, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers before I recognize the Honourable Minister to close debate? Seeing none. The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Close debate
Thank
on
you,
Bill 63.
Speaker, and I want to thank the members on the opposite side of the House for their helpful interventions. They have emphasized a couple of things that were very important to government back when this legislation was initially introduced back in 2004. I think all members know that in the Woodside refinery is that the workers there don't just live in Dartmouth, South Portland Valley, or Eastern Passage. They live all over the place, and probably even go into East Hanson. Could be some in my area that travel down there on a daily basis. And the other thing I can remember, just quick to the debate that we had back in 2004, was the security of supply for our province. And you know, we lost 2 other refineries. We do have one, and I guess if we look at that thing really in the total picture, it is a small refinery compared to the accepted standard these days, so keeping it here is very important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now hope that this bill will move on to law amendments and receive rapid passage there.
Thank you. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 63, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 8 of the Acts of 2004, the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act.
Order that this bill be referred to Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for today. I would move that we adjourn to meet again on Monday, hours from 7 to 10 p.m. Business of the day will be calling public bills for second reading. Bill number 38, the Consumer Protection Act.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Bill number 38. Bill number 38, the Consumer Protection Act. Bill number 54, the Maintenance Enforcement Act. And Bill number 72, the Retail Business Holiday Closing Act. As well, Mr. Speaker, we'll be calling public bills for third reading. Bills number 11, 12, 13, 15, 27, 39, 41. Bills number 43, 49, and 52.
Thank you. The motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The House will rise to sit again on Monday at 7 p.m. The House stands adjourned.